Take a look at this footage. It's a Friday afternoon. A 23-year-old man is casually walking through the aisles of a local hardware store. He's holding a packet of heavy-duty cable ties in his hands. He looks completely calm, just an everyday shopper on a normal day. Now, look at what's inside his trolley: a red jerry can for fuel and a long-handled garden shovel. Exactly 12 hours after this footage was recorded, a 21-year-old nursing student named Jasmeen Kaur will disappear from the parking lot of the aged care home where she works. She had broken up with him a month earlier. She had gone to the police. She had done everything she was supposed to do. It wasn't enough. This is the case of Jasmeen Kaur. Adelaide, Australia, March 2021. A case where the local police already had a file open before the night she went missing. But her story doesn't start in that hardware store. It starts 4 years earlier in a university hallway with 2 kids from Punjab who thought they'd found something good in a country that wasn't theirs. Who she was. Jasmeen was born in 1999 in a village in Punjab, in the north of India. The kind of village where everyone knew her family, knew her mother Rashpal, knew that the Gathwal household had raised a daughter who was sharp, kind, and quiet in the way that hides a real spine underneath. She wanted to be a nurse, not in a vague teenage way, in a specific, decided way. Nursing in India is hard work for low pay, and Jasmeen had heard the same thing every ambitious kid in Punjab heard in the late 2000s, that if you wanted a real future in healthcare, you went abroad. Australia, Canada, the UK. That's where the degrees meant something. That's where the work paid. In 2018, at 18 years old, she boarded a flight to Adelaide. Adelaide is not Sydney. It's not Melbourne. It's a quieter city on the southern coast of Australia, the kind of place that sells itself on parks and wineries and being a manageable size for international students. There's a real Punjabi community there. Temples, restaurants, networks of cousins and aunts and family friends who absorb new arrivals the way diaspora communities have done for 100 years. Jasmeen wasn't dropped into a void. She had her aunt and uncle. She had a place to land. She enrolled at TAFE SA, the technical and further education system that runs vocational programs across the state, and started the long road toward a registered nursing qualification. She picked up work at an aged care facility called Bucklands, run by Southern Cross Care in the suburb of North Plympton. Aged care in Australia is the kind of work most people won't do. The hours are unsocial, the pay is mediocre, and the labor itself is physical and emotional in equal measure. You're feeding people. You're changing them. You're sitting with them at 3 in the morning when they're confused and frightened and asking for a husband who died in 1994. Jasmeen took that job and held it. By every account from the people who worked alongside her, she was good at it. She was patient. She was warm. The residents liked her. That's the Jasmeen the cameras eventually had to describe in past tense. A 21-year-old who had crossed an ocean, who was paying her own way through nursing school, who was wiping the chins of strangers' grandparents at 6 in the morning because that's what the job required. She met him in a university hallway. Who he was. Tarikjot Singh was also from Punjab, also a student, also part of the same wave of young people who had landed in Adelaide on a study visa in the late 2010s. He was studying computer science. He was, on paper, exactly the kind of young man Jasmeen's family back home would have nodded at. Same background, same region, same religion, same trajectory. They started dating in 2019. By the standards of 2 international students in their early 20s, it moved fast. They saw each other's friends. They were known as a couple inside the Adelaide Punjabi community. They were the kind of relationship that, if it had ended cleanly, would have ended the way most early 20s relationships end, quietly, with some hurt feelings and no real damage. It did not end cleanly. Somewhere in 2020, Jasmeen began telling people that something was wrong, not in dramatic outbursts, in the small, careful way that women in controlling relationships often tell people, sideways, qualified, with the volume turned down so they can pretend later that they didn't really mean it. He was checking her phone. He was deciding who she could see. He didn't like her aunt. He didn't like her uncle. He didn't like the friends she had made at work. He had opinions about what she wore, where she went after her shifts, how long it took her to reply to a message. And underneath all of it, that low, constant question that controlling partners ask in 100 different forms. Who were you with? By late 2020, Jasmeen had decided she was done. She told him it was over. He did not accept that. What happened next was not a clean break and a sad few months of texts. What happened was the slow, methodical campaign that anyone who works in domestic violence will recognize on sight. He kept calling. He kept showing up. He kept reaching out through her friends, through her cousins, through people she barely knew, looking for any channel back into her life. When she blocked one number, another appeared. When she changed her routine, he found her at the new one. Her family back in Punjab knew. Her mother, Rashpal, would later tell an Australian courtroom that Jasmeen had refused him 100 times, not as a figure of speech, as a description. He would ask, and she would say no, and he would ask again, and she would say no, and the cycle would repeat until it had its own gravity. In early 2021, Jasmeen did something that takes a particular kind of courage when you're a 21-year-old international student far from home. She walked into a police station in Adelaide and made a formal report. She told them what he was doing. She put it on the record. The South Australia police took the report seriously enough to act. In February 2021, they issued Singh a formal stalking caution. In Australia, a stalking caution is the step below a restraining order. It's a documented warning delivered to the person, telling them in writing that their behavior has crossed a legal line and that any further contact can be prosecuted. It goes on the file. It's real. It's the system saying, "We see you. We know what you're doing. Stop." A caution is what the law allows at that stage. It is not a wall. It is a piece of paper. And a piece of paper does not stop a man who has already decided. What we know now, with the benefit of the evidence the prosecution would later put in front of the court, is that the 30 days between the caution and the murder were not 30 days of Singh cooling off. They were 30 days of him preparing. By the morning of Friday, March 5th, 2021, the preparation was nearly finished. He had a target. He had a timeline. He had decided what he wanted the world to look like by the end of the weekend. All he needed was the equipment. And so, that afternoon, he drove to a Bunnings hardware store in suburban Adelaide, picked up a trolley, and started shopping. He doesn't take his own car. This is the first detail that matters, because it's the first detail that proves the difference between a man losing control and a man covering tracks. He borrows a vehicle from a friend, a small, unremarkable car that isn't registered to him, isn't associated with him, and won't show up on any database that links a license plate to his name. He tells the friend some everyday reason for needing it. The friend hands over the keys. He drives to a Bunnings warehouse in suburban Adelaide. If you've never been to a Bunnings, picture an enormous warehouse-style hardware store, painted green and red, sitting in a flat parking lot the size of 2 football fields. They sell everything: lumber, plumbing, garden supplies, tools, the Australian equivalent of a Home Depot or a B&Q. They are everywhere, and they are the kind of place where, on a Friday afternoon, you can be one shopper among 300 and nobody will ever notice your face. The CCTV noticed his face. He walks in alone. He picks up a trolley. He moves through the aisles without hurry. At one point he stops, looks up at the signage, and walks over to a staff member to ask where to find one of the items on his list. The employee points him in the right direction. Singh says thank you. He keeps shopping. Into the trolley. A shovel. A long-handled garden shovel, the kind built for digging into hard, rocky ground. A packet of heavy-duty cable ties. A roll of duct tape. A pair of work gloves. A jerry can. He pushes the trolley to the checkout. He pays. He smiles at the cashier. He walks out into the parking lot, loads the bag into the car, and drives away. The whole transaction takes less than 15 minutes. There is no version of that shopping list that has an innocent explanation. Not one item, in combination with the others, has a household use. Cable ties bind wrists. Duct tape silences mouths. Gloves prevent fingerprints. A jerrycan carries fuel for a long drive into somewhere with no service stations, and a shovel digs. He went home. He waited. Jasmeen was working an evening shift at Buckland's aged care home in North Plimpton. It was a Friday like any other Friday. She had been on the floor for hours. The kind of shift that involves dinner service, medication rounds, getting residents ready for bed, the small, endless tasks of caring for people who can no longer care for themselves. By the time her shift ended, it was late. The sky over Adelaide was already dark. The parking lot next to the building was quiet and half empty. She had a routine: finish the shift, clock out, walk to her car, drive home. She made it as far as the car park. What happened in those next few minutes is something the police would later have to reconstruct from CCTV, from phone records, from the location data on a device that suddenly went silent at a very specific time. There is no footage of the abduction itself. There is footage of her leaving the building. There is footage from a different camera of a small, unremarkable car in the vicinity. There is the moment her phone stopped pinging towers in North Plimpton, and then there is the silence. She did not come home that night. Her aunt and uncle waited. Her phone went to voicemail. Her messages weren't being read. By the early hours of Saturday morning, her family had moved past worry and into the specific, sharp panic that comes from knowing, really knowing, that the person you love would have called by now if they could. They started making the calls themselves, to her friends, to her workplace, to anyone who might have seen her. By Saturday morning, they had reported her missing to South Australia police. By Saturday morning, she was already 400 kilometers away. The Flinders Ranges are one of the oldest landscapes on Earth, a spine of red mountains running north out of Adelaide, through wheat country, through sheep country, into terrain that thins out into something close to desert. It is beautiful. It is also empty. There are towns in the Flinders, but the towns are small, and the distance between them is measured in hours, not minutes. Phone reception is unreliable. Highway traffic is sparse, especially after dark. Once you turn off the main road, you can drive for an hour without passing another vehicle. If you wanted to take someone somewhere they could not be heard, you could not pick a better place in southern Australia. The drive from Adelaide to the area near a small town called Hawker takes around 5 hours. That is a long time to be in a car with someone you intend to kill. It is a long time for that person to be in the car with you. The prosecution, when they later laid out the timeline for the court, did not have to embellish what those 5 hours were. The physical evidence found at the scene told the court on its own what condition Jasmeen had been in when she arrived. The cable ties had been used. The duct tape had been used. She was bound. She was silenced. She was conscious. 5 hours of highway. Then a turnoff. Then a smaller road. Then a track that barely qualifies as a road at all, winding into a section of bushland near a place called Moralana Creek. He stopped the car. He got Jasmeen out, and he picked up the shovel. What he did in the next hour is the part of this story the sentencing judge would later say he could not find words for. The police would find that part of the story too, but not for another 4 days. Because by sunrise on Saturday, March 6th, Singh was already driving back toward Adelaide, alone in the borrowed car, with a clean shovel in the boot and a missing person report being filed about the woman he had just left in the dirt. He had a story ready. He believed he had covered every track. He was wrong about almost all of it. By Saturday morning, Singh was back in Adelaide. He returned the car. He showered. He went on with his weekend. And one name was already at the top of the police list before the sun came up, because Jasmeen had walked into a police station 1 month earlier and told them, on the record, who was harassing her. The file already existed. The name was already in the system. The police came looking for Singh on Saturday afternoon. He opened the door. He let them in. He was calm. He told the officers he hadn't seen Jasmeen in weeks. He told them they had broken up. He told them he had no idea where she was, that he was as worried as everyone else, that he hoped she was all right. He volunteered to help. He answered questions. He gave them his timeline for Friday, a version of his Friday that did not include a borrowed car, a Bunnings parking lot, or a 5-hour drive into the desert. The officers listened. They wrote it down. They left. And then they started checking. This is the part of an investigation that does not look like television. There are no kicked down doors. There is no shouting. There are detectives at desks pulling CCTV footage from a hardware store. There are analysts running the location history of a phone that went dark on Friday night. There are uniformed officers knocking on the doors of his friends, asking quiet questions about who borrowed what car and when. The story he had given them started coming apart within 24 hours. The friend confirmed the car. The Bunnings CCTV showed him at the checkout, smiling, paying cash. His own phone record showed a 5-hour signal trail leading north out of Adelaide on Friday night and a 5-hour trail leading back on Saturday morning. And when they seized his laptop and forensic analysts started going through it, they found something that ended any remaining ambiguity about what kind of case this was. He had been searching for it. For weeks, map queries of remote areas in South Australia, routes into the Flinders Ranges, searches about soil composition, about how long it takes for human remains to be discovered in arid terrain, about which areas of the state had the lowest population density. He had bookmarked locations, he had compared distances, he had narrowed it down, he had not snapped, he had not lost control. He had built this. By Tuesday, March 9th, the police arrested him. For the first day of questioning, he held the line. He didn't know anything. He hadn't done anything. He wanted a lawyer. And then, sometime in the second day of interviews, something shifted. The detectives never publicly described exactly what broke him, whether it was the volume of evidence laid out on the table or the laptop searches, or the moment he understood that the story he had constructed was not going to survive the next 48 hours of forensic work. He told them he would show them where she was. A convoy of vehicles drove north from Adelaide on Wednesday. Singh was in one of them. The drive that had taken him 5 hours on Friday night took the police the same 5 hours on Wednesday morning. He directed them off the highway, onto the smaller road, onto the track that barely qualified as a road, and then to a spot in the bush near Moralana Creek. He pointed. What they found at that location is what the rest of this story has been holding back. Jasmeen Kaur had been buried in a shallow grave. She was blindfolded. A piece of fabric had been tied across her eyes. She was gagged. Her wrists were bound behind her back with the cable ties from the Bunnings shopping trip. Her ankles were bound. There was a cut across her throat, a wound that was real, that had bled, but that had not been deep enough to kill her. The forensic pathologist who examined her body would later have to explain to the court what that meant. The throat wound was not the cause of death. It had been inflicted, and she had survived it. And then something else had happened. The autopsy traced soil, the red dirt of the Flinders Ranges, into Jasmeen's airway. She had been buried alive. The pathology was unambiguous about it. The dirt was not deposited there after death. It had been inhaled. That is the detail this whole story has been walking toward. That is what the sentencing judge meant when he said from the bench that he was unable to find words for what had been done. While the South Australia police were assembling the case, something else was happening on the other side of the world. Singh's parents, back in Punjab, were giving interviews to Indian media. They had a different story. In their version, Jasmeen had taken her own life. Their son had panicked. He had buried her body in fear, in shock, because he didn't know what else to do. He was not a murderer. He was a frightened young man who had made a terrible mistake in a foreign country. That narrative traveled. It was repeated. It reached parts of the Punjabi community on both sides of the ocean. In the weeks before his trial, faced with the full weight of the prosecution's evidence, the Bunnings footage, the borrowed car, the laptop searches, the forensic findings, the soil in her airway, Singh changed his plea. He pleaded guilty to murder. You do not plead guilty to murder if your girlfriend killed herself. You do not plead guilty to murder if you panicked. You plead guilty to murder when the evidence against you is overwhelming and your lawyers have told you in plain language that a jury is going to convict you of exactly what you did. The sentencing took place in the Supreme Court of South Australia. Jasmeen's mother, Rashpal, traveled from Punjab to be in that courtroom. She gave a victim impact statement. She spoke about her daughter, the girl who had wanted to be a nurse, the girl who had crossed an ocean, the girl who had refused this man 100 times. She spoke about the silence on the other end of the phone the morning she realized her daughter was gone. The prosecution laid out the case, the premeditation, the shopping list, the borrowed car, the 5-hour drive, the grave, and then the prosecutor said the sentence about Jasmeen's final moments that nobody in that courtroom has been able to forget since. She had to have been aware in those moments of the hopelessness of her situation. That is what the prosecutor wanted the court to hold in its mind, not the abstraction of a murder, the specific human awareness of a 21-year-old woman bound and blindfolded in the dirt of a place she had never been, 400 kilometers from anyone who knew her name, fully understanding that no one was coming. The court originally sentenced Singh to life imprisonment with a minimum of 22 years and 10 months. However, the prosecution appealed the decision, arguing the term was manifestly inadequate given the cruelty of the crime. In June 2024, the appeals court agreed, increasing his non-parole period to 28 years and 6 months. He will be 49 years old, in his late 40s, before he is even eligible to apply for release in September 2049. If he is ever granted parole, he faces immediate deportation from Australia back to India, having long since forfeited his right to remain in the country.